Welcome to the Fair Lending Best Practices video, which will focus on methods of lending discrimination and how to avoid them, penalties, and best practices. To start, there are 3 methods of lending discrimination under ECOA and the Fair Housing Act: overt discrimination, disparate treatment, and disparate impact. Overt discrimination exists when a lender openly discriminates based on one or more of the prohibited factors. Here's an example. A lender offers a mortgage to a 25-year-old at a certain rate. The next day, the same mortgage loan is offered to a similarly situated 65-year-old applicant at a higher rate. Discrimination on the basis of age has occurred. The similarly situated older borrower was offered a worse rate than the younger one. It is important to remember, loan terms can vary based on non-prohibited factors like credit score. Overt discrimination also exists when a lender expresses but doesn't necessarily act on a discriminatory preference. Let's say a lending officer was telling a client, "We don't like to offer mortgages to people like you, but the law says we have to." That statement violates the Fair Housing Act's law against statements expressing a discriminatory preference, as well as ECOA, which states that a lender may not discourage applicants from applying for a loan based on any of the prohibited factors. Now let's take the second method of lending discrimination, disparate treatment. That's when a lender treats a client differently on the basis of any of the prohibited factors, regardless of whether the treatment was intentional or unintentional. Sounds a lot like overt discrimination, right? Disparate treatment is more likely to occur in the treatment of applicants who are neither well-qualified nor clearly unqualified. Why do you ask? Applicants that are close cases have more room and need for lender discretion. Also, whether or not an applicant qualifies may depend on the level of assistance provided by a lender in completing an application. Let's say a non-minority couple applies for a mortgage loan. The loan officer finds adverse information in the couple's credit report, but since he provides elite client service, he discusses the credit report with the couple and determines that the adverse information was incorrect and helps them dispute the error and gets it removed. The non-minority couple gets a loan. Yay! Now the same situation, except it's a minority couple applying for the same type of loan. Upon discovering the same adverse information in their credit report, the loan officer does not assist the minority couple to correct their credit issues, so the loan application is denied. These two similarly situated couples were treated differently in the level of assistance they were provided, apparently on the basis of a prohibited factor, race. The third and final method of lending discrimination is called disparate impact. The confusing thing about disparate impact is that at first it may seem like no discrimination has occurred at all. Let me explain. A disparate impact occurs when a lender applies a neutral policy or practice equally to all clients, but in actuality, the policy or practice disproportionately excludes or burdens certain persons on a prohibited basis. Confused? Let's look at an example. A lender's policy is to not accept loan applications for single-family residents with loan values less than $60,000 anywhere. That policy applies to all loan applications regardless of who's submitting the application. So far, that seems fair, right? The discriminatory effect occurs in how certain people are impacted by this policy. Think about it. There's a group of people out there who can only afford homes that cost $60,000 or less, or the value of the houses in the area in which they live are primarily lower than $60,000. If this group of people is shown to disproportionately consist of minority applicants, then this policy, while applied to all, actually disproportionately excludes minority applicants. Now, a policy or practice that creates a disparity on a prohibited basis is not by itself proof of a violation. For example, a policy or practice that is justified by a business necessity would not be a violation. In order to be a business necessity, the justification must be actual, not hypothetical or speculative. But even if a policy or practice can be justified by business necessity, it may still be found to be in violation if an alternative policy or practice could serve the same purpose with a less discriminatory effect. Whether or not the lender intended to discriminate is irrelevant when establishing a disparate impact in a violation of ECOA or the Fair Housing Act. If the fair lending laws are violated, consumers could be harmed and the violator could be subject to civil lawsuits, injunctive relief, penalties, fines, loss of their licenses to do business, and people could lose their job. In 2020, the CFPB announced action against a non-bank retail mortgage creditor and broker for discriminatory mortgage lending practices, including illegal redlining. The president of the broker shop and host of a radio show made disparaging remarks about predominantly African-American communities. The CFPB alleges that his comments could discourage people in those neighborhoods from doing business with them. No one should feel discouraged from applying for a loan, so it's important to remember that words matter whether you're in the office or representing your company in any capacity. And this is just one example, there are plenty more. So you can see why it's important to comply with the fair lending laws. And in order to comply, there's a lot to be done. For example, indicating equal housing lender in marketing materials and on websites, prominently displaying a fair housing poster in public lobbies where real estate loans are made, treating loan applicants fairly, waiting on them in order in which they arrived or called, greeting them politely and properly, following procedures and standards for all applicants, offering the same materials to each applicant, providing consistent and complete information, encourage open communication during the loan process, and diligently researching credit discrepancies with the same care for each applicant. Thank you for your time.